Welcome to a special edition of Hashtag Trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Let's get into it. Security vendor CrowdStrike released an update from their initial post-incident review. The first and most surprising information was that CrowdStrike says the incident was not caused by code or a kernel driver. The kernel driver was the assumed cause in most industry speculation. This might be semantics to some extent, especially since the offending file is stored in a folder called system32/drivers/CrowdStrike. But clearly, whatever you call it, CrowdStrike acknowledges that this file contained bad data, which resulted in an out-of-bounds memory read, triggering an exception that Windows was not set up to handle gracefully, and that resulted in the crash. Now, I'm not trying to attribute anything to CrowdStrike. I'm sure they're taking accountability, but if the idea was that if Windows had just been able to handle this gracefully, that might seem like passing the buck. But if the non-driver issue is somewhat confusing, we did get an answer to the question that many of us were asking, and that is, why didn't their testing catch this? The report lists a pretty thorough testing procedure before release, which is, on our reading, pretty much consistent with industry best practice. So the template did go through a testing regime. CrowdStrike notes that they issued 2 other templates at the same time, and both of those behaved as expected. So what went wrong? Apparently, it was a bug in what CrowdStrike refers to as the content validator, which allowed this template to pass through despite having problematic data. Now, reliance on this content validator was apparently an issue, which raises another question. Whether you call this a template or a driver, shouldn't the severe implications of a null value or whatever problematic value it was have been anticipated, and would you really want a single point of failure for that big issue in your testing process, which apparently the content validator was? Now, we've got some initial answers to why multiple reboots of a machine might be necessary and why they might correct the error. Apparently, this template can't be deleted remotely or simply overwritten. It stays in the sensor's directory. Cleverly, their team, in a very short time, opted to put that file on their known bad list. After multiple reboot attempts, it could be blocked and normal activity, in some cases, resumed. So, out of what they've learned, some assurances were given to CrowdStrike customers. First, CrowdStrike is stating that there's no impact to customer protection on working systems. Second, they've listed a number of things that they'll do to prevent this in the future. Among these, adding additional checks to the content validator and staggering deployment to gradually release to their base, starting with what they refer to as a canary deployment, likening back to the old idea of taking a canary into a coal mine because the canary would die more rapidly than a human, so you get an early warning. One could question whether or not they should have been in place, but those are very reasonable steps. There's more that you can find out, and I'd normally say there's a link to the complete text included in our show notes, but as a reminder that this is a time when, as CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz warned about adversarial and bad actors taking advantage of this situation, you should ensure that you take information only from the CrowdStrike site and not from anybody else, no matter how reliable you think they are, including us. So if you want to find out more, just go to crowdstrike.com. The link to their remediation hub is absolutely obvious. And there are some good resources there that you might want to refer to. For example, they issued a video on how an end user can fix the problem, and it's very well done, clear, and provides a step-by-step that even a novice could follow. So if anyone still has people in the field affected, or if you know small companies or individuals that somehow got hit, this is worth looking at and possibly sending out. And that's our show for today. We focused on the CrowdStrike issue because I thought it was big news. We're still on summer hours, so we won't have a Friday news show for you. We will, however, have a great program for the weekend edition, and I'll be back with the news Monday morning. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a thrilling Thursday.